the day for the convocation lecture delivered by Professor Kifli Abdulrazak, President of the International Association of Universities, which is actually a UNICEF-affiliated organization. We promise, as usual, that we'll be having a good time. Once again, important. But, okay, sorry, I meant to say UNESCO, not UNICEF. That's the International Association of Universities. It's a UNESCO-affiliated organization. We're all important dignitaries, so feel very important. But, you know, as I think it was George Orwell that said it, we're all equal, but some of us are more equal than the others. In this particular setting that we are in, some people are more important. You may go to another setting, if I don't mention your name could be mentioned there. So, do feel important. But we have some very important Chancellor, recently awarded member of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Ishaq Olanrewaju Oloyede. You're welcome, sir. He is also the Secretary of the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. I'd also like to recognize a very important person without whom perhaps we may not be celebrating today. And I'm not being selfish because I'm a woman. This next person is a woman. She's the wife of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdulgani Ambadi, Dr. Mrs. Taiwo Ambadi. You're welcome, ma, to today's event. I'd like to recognize the presence of the wife of our former, immediate past Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mrs. Oloyede. Also with us is a former Chief Judge of Kwara State, Justice Raliat. She's not here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, madam. Okay, she's also a woman. Hospital. Professor Olatiwo. Welcome, sir. We'd like to recognize the presence of two council members. Professor Kolade Joseph. You're welcome, sir. And Alhaji Abdul Rashid Salman. You're welcome, sir. Welcome to the program. She's a director of credit. If you're looking for money, you may think of her, but credit actually means something else here. It doesn't mean she's the director of money. She's not from Baby, but I just wanted to explain that. Credit means the Center for Research, Development and Innovation. A former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Kwara State, Hajia Habiba Yusuf. You're welcome, ma'am.
I'm actually the story of you are our guest. He is the guest of
yeah.
Yes. Go on.
Pleased to be we enjoy the presence of a former BVC, Professor Olayemi. Professor Olayemi, you're welcome, sir. They have, who is here present. We also have the pleasure to introduce here the chairman of the University of Ilorin Academic Staff Union, ASU, Dr. Adeoye. We appeal to you for questions as we prepare to start the program soonest. Thank you. Professor Ladishi, you're welcome, sir.
Today's lecture is, as I said earlier, going to be delivered by an eminent professor, an eminent personality, Professor Zulkifli Abdulrazak, the president of the International Association of Universities. His lecture is titled Innovation, a Transdisciplinary View. Do please bear with us. We are very conscious of time here at the University of Ilorin. We do have a tradition of starting right on the dot of time. Actually stand up in recognition of intellectualism, in recognition of hard work. The people who are coming in, please, could we stand up in recognition of these people? They are our scholars, those who are the best in their departments. Our standing up, as I said earlier, is a recognition of hard work, a recognition of intellectualism, a recognition of success, because you already know a success story from the beginning. They have just begun their lives and already they are top of their class. These are young men and women. We put enormous trust on the leaders of tomorrow, those with seeing them, we are assured that humanity will remain. Humanity will be safe, at least until our Creator decides to ask all of us to return to Him. We're hoping that that should be centuries and centuries and centuries later on. Our scholars, be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Our lecturer, today's lecturer, Professor Zulkifli Abdulrazak. I will be giving you their names later, but you're welcome, ma'am, you're welcome, sir, to today's program. Thank you. scholars to please follow the usher there. He will lead you to another part of the auditorium where you could sit and be more comfortable. Those sitting behind our scholars, please. The Emir of Shonga, Dr. Haliu Yahaya. You're welcome, sir. We recognize a model for some of us, for all of us, much, much younger than he is. As the former chairman of ICPC, Justice Mustafa Akobi. Welcome, sir, and thank you for coming. For those of us who work here, academic, non-academic, and who study here, students, we say better by far with so much pride, knowing how much hard work we have put in to make this university what it is. And when I say work, I ought to have said worked in the past tense, and work, and working, and will be working, because we recognize the efforts of past workers of this great university. Past. Okay? I will continue my story about what Better by Far means to us and to outsiders. As we stand up for the second procession, is being led by the Deputy Registrar, Academic Support Services. It is made up of principal officers of the university, deans, directors, some directors from deans, the Director of Academic Planning, principal officers like the DVC, the University Bursar, in front of the Vice Chancellor is our Convocation Lecturer, and our Vice Chancellor ends that session. Please, the University of Ilorin anthem. Today is the fourth event in the series of events marking the 30th convocation ceremonies of the University of Ilorin, the better by far university. We'll begin first with an introduction of those on the high table. The Vice Chancellor is the owner of today, so to say. As the Yorubas say, the person whose head needs cutting. And it's a thing of, I suppose it must be a thing of celebration in the Yoruba culture if you use that as a metaphor for celebration. The Vice Chancellor, a distinguished academic in veterinary medicine, Professor Abdulganiyu Ambali. Since to his right is our convocation lecturer. He came all the way from Malaysia, but he's used to traveling. He's been all over the world. And I won't be surprised if he's been to Nigeria before, but we are celebrating him here today in the University of Ilorin and trying to pick his brains, so to say. Our convocation lecturer, Professor Zulkifli Abdulrazak. Along with the Vice Chancellor are other distinguished members of the university. I'll begin with the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Professor Nike Yetunde Sidikat Ijaya. Welcome, ma'am. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, Management Services, Professor Isa Fakunle. You're welcome, sir. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Technology and Innovation, Professor Gabriel Olatunji. Welcome, sir. We also have the Registrar, Mr. Emmanuel Dada Obafen. Welcome, sir. And the Bursar, Mr. Saka Yusuf. Welcome, sir. I haven't forgotten the librarian, Dr. Joseph Omoni. Also on the front row is the Provost, College of Health Sciences, College of Medical Sciences, Professor W.B.R. Johnson. My colleague, Dr. Billy Olajide, will continue with the introduction of the other members of the academic staff seated on the high table.
Thank you very much, my colleague, Dr. Mrs. Falake Aliyu. I have the pleasure to introduce the Deputy Registrar Academic here present. I also want to recognize the Director of Academic Planning, the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture, the Dean of Arts, Dean of Basic Medical Sciences, Dean of Clinical Sciences, Active Dean of Communication and Information Sciences, Dean of Education, Dean of Engineering and Technology, Dean of Environmental Sciences, Acting Dean of Law, Dean of Life Sciences, Dean of Management Sciences, Dean of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Dean of Physical Sciences, Dean of Social Sciences, Dean of Veterinary Medicine, Dean of Postgraduate School, and Dean of Student Affairs. You are welcome to this very important program.
In order to introduce some of us who are seated facing them, I'll go over again, all over again, and introduce some of our eminent personalities who are seated, I don't want to say the lower table, but on the lower side of the auditorium. I'll be Chancellor of the University of Ilorin, member of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and Secretary of the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Professor Ishaq Oloyede. Chancellor, Professor Abdulganiyu Ambali is also here. Dr. and Mrs. Tai Ambali, you're welcome, ma'am. The wife and son of the convocation lecturer are also here. You're welcome, ma'am. You're welcome, sir. Also with us is the wife of Professor Ishaq Oloyede, Dr. and Mrs. Ramat Oloyede. We also have in our midst the Emir of Shonga, Dr. Haliru Yahaya. We have two council members in our midst, Professor Kolade Joseph and Alhaji Abdul Rashid Salman. Also with us is a former chairman of the ICPC, Justice Mustafa Akobi. We have the Chief Medical Director of the University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital, Professor Olatimo. You're welcome, sir. We also have with us a former Vice Chancellor of the Fountain University, Professor Oloyede. We also have a former Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilorin, Professor A.B. Olayemi. You're welcome, sir. Okay. We also have a former DVC, former DVC RTI, Professor Oladele. You're welcome to the program. Former Chief Justice, Kwara State, Justice Elelu. Former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Hajia Habiba Yusuf. Chairman, University of Ilorin ASU, Dr. Abdul Rashid Adewi. Having done that, we go on to the next item on our agenda, Chancellor, Professor Abdulganiyu Ambali, to deliver his address.
The convocation lecturer, Professor Sulkifli Abdulrazak, the President, International Association of Universities, IAU, who is also here with his wife and son, Junior Abdulrazak. Members of the diplomatic corps here present, especially the Cuban ambassador to Nigeria, our father, Honorable Justice Mustafa Akobi, former chairman of the ICPC, members of University of Ilorin Governing Council here present, former Vice Chancellor of this great university, Professor Ishaq Oloyede, former Vice Chancellor of Fountain University, Professor O.B. Oloyede, all former principal officers here present, especially the Deputy Vice Chancellors, the Chief Medical Director of University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital, our royal fathers here present, principal officers of University of Ilorin, former principal officers, provosts, deans, and directors, members of Senate here present, my wife, Dr. Mrs. Taiwo Ambali, and other ladies here present, distinguished invited guests, students and staff of this great university, especially the university scholars, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. The title of my welcome address is Timely Intervention. I welcome you sincerely on behalf of the entire Council, Senate, management, staff and students of the University of Ilorin to this important occasion. I heartily welcome the distinguished guests and eminent personalities here present. I specifically appreciate the presence of our convocation lecturer, whose name I will mention in due course, and the support of my predecessor, Professor Ishaq Olairewaju Oloyede OFR, towards the success of today's event. The University of Ilorin, as you are all aware, in recent years, has been committed to inviting the best and at its convocation lectures. While we have tapped from the intellectual capital of Nigeria by listening to the cream of our intelligentsia, we have also been moving to other parts of the world to enrich our knowledge and showcase the important fact that a true university is universal. For instance, after having a former executive secretary of National Universities Commission, the university had benefited during an occasion like this from the insight of the Secretary General of the Magna Charta Universitum, Bologna, Italy, as well as a former director of UNESCO not too long ago, a pioneer expatriate staff member of the university and professor of medicine at the University of Newcastle in faraway Australia, had also served as our convocation lecturer. When the current administration, which I'm privileged to head, came on board in 2012, the convocation lecturer of the year is a serving Vice Chancellor, Professor Akwasi Asabere Ameya of the University of Education, Winneba, Ghana. He was here on October 21st, 2012. His 28th convocation lecture titled African Schooling and Education, the Hopes, Aspirations, and Challenges, a Critical Dialogue, struck a chord within the university community. Last year, our drive for excellence took us to the United States of America, and we had the pleasure of listening to the former ambassador of the United States to Nigeria, His Excellency Ambassador Walter Omawale Carrington, an officer of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, OFR. He addressed us on the topical theme of On the Dawn of Nigeria's Second Century, Challenges to a New Generation, also on October 21st, 2013, just like this. Today we have traveled to Asia to bring an Asian tiger in person of the #1 citizen of the world university system, a former Vice Chancellor of 2 Malaysian universities, Professor Zulkifli Abrazak, to address us, the presence of the President of the International Association of Universities on our campus, and the lecture he will deliver today will no doubt provide a timely intervention for us in our drive to bring more innovation to bear in our quest to make this university an academic palace, an intellectual paradise. One thing that I'm sure of is that at the end of the convocation lecture, to be delivered by our amiable IAU president, every one of us that has the privilege of being here will go out better than he or she came in. Professor Abdulrazak will be discussing with us the topic innovation, a transdisciplinary approach. I want to urge you all to listen attentively in order to benefit immensely from the wealth of his experience. A vibrant writer in this university, Dr. M.A. Adediviji, wrote recently something on Ilorin and innovation in Ilorin Bulletin. And it was right to identify innovation as the cornerstone of our activities. He also cited Dorothy Leonard and Swap Walter, who defined innovation in their book, and I quote, "When Sparks Fly," released by Boston Harvard Business School Press in 1999, as this is of knowledge in novel, relevant, and valued new products, process, or services. Also in analyzing how we make innovation work in the running of the university affairs, resulting in high ranking and the magnetic pull the university has on several admission applicants, he quoted the well-known Steve Jobs, who said, "You can't connect the dots by looking forward. You can only connect them by looking backwards." So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, either your gut, destiny, life, karma, or whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. Incidentally, it is innovation which is also not letting the university down. That is at the front burner of discussion in our innovative university today. The university connects the past with its present to define and shape its future, which is being manifested now. By looking at innovation from the transdisciplinary perspective, the presentation of the IAU president is intended, among other things, to gear us up in our various faculties, departments, and offices to embrace innovative ways of doing things in order to achieve excellence. This lecture, I think, is a timely intervention that we need in our journey as individuals and as institution and nation. Meanwhile, it is customary to have hard copies of our convocation lecture. This year, however, you will all have the presentation quite all right, but not in the conventional hard copy. You will have it in soft version. Those of you who have your laptops here can follow the lecturer in due course as he makes his presentation. Innovation is all about novelty. I urge you to embrace innovation as we listen to the convocation lecturer and you get your CD of his lecture. And I'm sure you have it already. Then, who is the convocation lecturer? Professor Tan Sri Dato Sulkifli Abdulrazak is the current 14th president of the International Association of Universities, which University of Ilorin is a member. A position he assumed in 2012. Before then, our convocation lecturer had served as the first vice president of the IAU between 2008 and 2012, and president of the Southeast Asia Institutions of Higher Learning between 2012 2007 and 2008. A preeminent university administrator and emeritus vice chancellor, Professor Abdulrazak was the vice chancellor of University Saint Malaysia for over a decade, between 2000 and 2011. And along the way, he was a founding vice chancellor of Al-Bukhari International University, Malaysia in 2011. Before I tell you more about this great scholar of international repute, let me say that it was a divine grace that he was born. His father was the sole survivor of Malaysia's student of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. His well-respected father, a professor of Japanese studies, who died in July last year, God bless his soul, was a student of Hiroshima-born University, now part of the University of Hiroshima. He was in a class on that day, and his other Malaysian colleagues that were with him died as a result of the bombing. Therefore, our convocation lecturer, you will agree with me, is a child of destiny, and the world is lucky to have his father survive the bombing. The timely intervention of divine help that saved the day, and the world university system is better for it. We are also lucky at the University of Ilorin to have him here today with us. Professor Abdulrazak is renowned nationally and internationally. He is the first Malaysian to serve and to ever attain the leadership of IAU. At the international level, he served as a member of the Asia-European Meeting Advisory Educational Hub Committee, member of the Executive Council of the Association of Commonwealth Universities, and member of the Advisory Committee of the World Universities Forum. In Malaysia, Professor Abdulrazak's name can be said to be synonymous with university education. He has served as the chairman of the Malaysian Vice Chancellor's Rectors Committee and Malaysian Examination Council. He was also an advisor to the National Higher Education Research Institute. Apart from being the chairman of that committee, the present organization of the Open University of Malaysia. He was also a member of the National Economic Advisory Council between 2009 and 2011. While at the same time, he was a co-chair of the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology between 2009 and 2011. At various times in his rich and robust career, our convocation lecturer had served as a member of the National Economic Advisory Council, the National Biotechnology Implementation Committee, the National IT Committee, and now is served on the Malaysian Innovation Agency. You therefore know that fewer persons can be more qualified to make a presentation on innovation than this multiple award-winning scholar and a global university. Among other fellowships, Professor Abdulrazak is a fellow of the Academy of Science, Malaysia, fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Science, Malaysian Institute of Malaysia, and a recipient of several honorary doctorate degrees from various world universities. He has also received several honors from various Malaysian and international organizations for his vast contributions to the development of humanity. Professor Abrazak is a writer of note and a public affairs commentator. Since 1995, he has maintained a regular column in the influential and oldest Malaysian newspaper in steel print, New Straits Times, when he discusses topical issues in education, science, and current affairs. He is married to Masra Abidin, and the marriage is blessed with Rizal, Johan, Suryani, and Farhana. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome the #1 university man in the world to the podium of the #1 university in Nigeria as he delivers his 30th convocation lecture of this university. Thank you.
Greeting of peace and a very good morning. The Vice Chancellor of this university, Professor Abdul Ghaniyu Ambali, my colleague and friend, former Vice Chancellor Professor Ishak Oluyade, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Honorary Justice Mustafa Akandi, former chair of ICPC, members of the University Governing Council, principal officers of this university, royal fathers here present, provosts and deans of various faculty, my beloved wife and son, wife of the Vice Chancellor and the former Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, staff, students of this university, university scholars and professors, members of the media and press, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart to allow me this privilege of coming to this university, and not so much to give a lecture, but rather to share some of the thoughts that I have after going through a journey of being a university administrator for quite some time, that I thought it is important for us to share some of these experiences so that both our university can flourish in the future. Indeed, it is a privilege for me to be here when I was first told by Professor Ishak that his coming to Malaysia will not be in vain because I have to come to Ilorin to reciprocate what he has done. And that's rather a big task. With you today, trying to make a kind of a complimentary gesture of what Isha has given us. And I would like to start by congratulating you on at least 3 occasions. One is, of course, the 30th convocation of Ilorin, which I also want to convey congratulations to the graduates, those who are going to graduate for this #1 university, Nigeria, but also to the world at large. I'm also very privileged to be here to learn yesterday from the Vice Chancellor that Ilorin University is the best in Nigeria. And you would not want to be anywhere else but in this particular university. There's also a daunting task for me now to match up with your expectation as the foremost university in Nigeria. Last but not least, I think it's an also important issue to learn that Nigeria has been declared Ebola-free because unless and until we have in the environment which is stable, not only politically, but also health-wise and social-wise, it is really difficult to imagine how we can move forward as a nation, as a community, and as one people. And congratulations for making this happen, at least while I'm still around here in Nigeria. What I'm going to do today is basically not so much specifically to contextualize on Nigeria. These are issues which I think is common not only to Nigerians but also to Malaysians and indeed to all universities worldwide. The question of innovation has been talked about in many forums and in many discussions But by and large, I think it has gone into a kind of very stereotype way of looking at innovation, and particularly when you talk innovation in the context of just wealth creation, material mobility, rather than the human person per se. And this is where I will try to redefine, quote unquote, innovation in a very transdisciplinary way, taking all the other concerns about innovation so that we can understand innovation in the larger terms, not only to move ourselves forward, but also our university and the community, and more importantly, to get in touch with the world at large so that we can move forward in one world. I am very unhappy to see the kind of disparities that we see in the world today, particularly in developing countries. While people talk about innovation, our countries tend to lag behind most of the time because the definition of innovation do not suit our purpose in that particular context. Let me start with the first slide here that says, like, when you look at the kind of changes around the world, there is something that we are familiar with. There are many changes that's happening since days before, quote unquote, modernity, but until now. But this particular slide illustrates two things. One is the kind of movement of change that you see, particularly after the introduction of technology in the technological era. The kind of changes that we see is really very, very high in terms of the speed. It moves from era to era within a very short period of time. But when you look back, there are also other changes, particularly the movement from what we call primitive era. And I am now beginning to revise my thoughts on what is so-called primitive as I move around. And I see the so-called primitive era is not that primitive at all, after all. They've got their own technology, they've got their own sets of values, they've got their own kind of achievements that we in the modern times maybe are not able to appreciate because we have left those times long before. Let me give you an example. For example, when we go to Iraq before the war, and we find that how water has been distributed from the oasis to miles away without using any technology of hydraulic pump or dams, but yet people are able to share water among themselves without, quote unquote, destroying the environment per se. Last year when we were in Peru, I had a chance to go to Machu Picchu to see the kind of civilization that was built in very high mountain ranges that we can't imagine it could be done today without the help of so-called modern technology. There are many of these examples, and I'm sure if you look around Nigeria, there are many other examples that we regard as primitive, but they are not primitive after all. And this is where I'm going to contextualize innovation. How do we take this so-called innovation of yesteryears and mainstream it so that we can be part and parcel of this movement in making innovation a kind of a success story for our society and nation. Next slide, please. Again, if you see the kind of transformation that's been happening, most of this transformation has been, quote unquote, mechanical in its nature. Be it the steam power, be it the railway, be it electric motor supplies, and so on and so forth, until the early 1990s when the word biotechnology has been coined. And from then on, we begin to see other disciplines like nanotechnology, and from nanotechnology has been predicted, we can now move into brain sciences, where brains will be explored, and that's the last frontier, quote unquote, for research, where innovation can be handy for us. Next slide, please. For example, these are quotations by people who are actually very knowledgeable about the science that talks about using nanotechnology will entirely replace our brain. And it is something which is very daunting, the brain, because the brain is actually our basis for life in this particular sense. Once delivered from the limitation of biology, and biology seems to be limited in this particular days, and how we can liberate biology, we will decide and choose among others unimagined capacities. The nature of intelligence and the mechanics of nanotechnology-based extension adds capacity and capabilities to the human body, brain, and life. In other words, there are other frontiers that we can go into as far as innovation is concerned, apart from just the so-called, quote-unquote, mechanistic technology as we learn of it today. Next slide, please. This is a kind of transition that we have seen, which is real for us, and I think everybody can relate to it. When we look at the so-called production economy, where we depend on very tangible assets of land, machines, and so on and so forth, we have moved now to the next slide, please. We've moved on to what we call the information age or information era, or some even call this the technology, the innovation era, and led to another set of technology that do not depend on tangibles, but more on intangibles like data, information, knowledge, attitudes, and so on and so forth. This is a kind of transition that we have experienced, and I believe we are going to experience another set of transition, moving from the knowledge economy to another sort of economy, which I will explain later. Can I have the next slide, please? Let me just try and bring you to the kind of changes that we're going to see. In the 1970s, when we first have our computers, we were introduced to this gadget called the mouse. And everybody was wondering why it is called the mouse. Why did not, some other technical jargon rather than a biological jargon. Next. That device, the mouse, is worked on with what we call a circuit like this, and the term that is used is motherboard. We begin to have two very biological models. One is the mouse, the other one is motherboard. Can I have the next slide, please? And the motherboard is organized as though it is like our nervous system, the neural system. The kind of terminology that is used, dendrite, axons, synapses, these are also the terminology used when we describe circuits per se. Next one. That circuit or that motherboard can be infested by terminologies or by gadgets called the worms, bacteria, viruses. Again, we are seeing very similar jargon that is used in terms of biology, in terms of the neuronal structures, and also in terms of the kind of infestation of worms and also viruses. Next slide, please. If you've got worms and viruses, the way to remedy it is by using antiviral, and this antiviral particularly called penicillin, almost equivalent to the drug called penicillin that we use for our own antibacterial infection. Now, these examples are enough to show you that although we are moving mechanically into a kind of an era of technology, but all the examples and all the terminologies are taken from the world of biology. And as though it's not enough, now there is a discipline called insectronics, that engineers are studying insects to build better electronic systems so that you can use the gadget much more versatilely in terms of trying to solve problems or to look at new issues and so on and so forth. We have got also now a discipline called amphibionics, which look at other sets of animals to create another set of gadgets. And last but not least, next please, we have got human robotics. This again showed us how science and technology has moved into an area where biology sort of becomes the dominant factor. Can I have the next slide? So you have got now a lot of disciplines, a lot of discussion that talks about technology in the context of biology, be it the neural setting, be it in terms of computing, be it in terms of making robots. And can I have the next slide? You will see these two figures. One is the inventor, the other one is the robot. They are almost alike in that particular context. The jargons that we use, we're going to talk about human-robotic interrelationship in terms of the very same human activity that we're going through: love, sex, interrelation, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, I think when we discover the human genome, that perhaps is the ultimate as far as technology is concerned. We have got the human genome now that is now being used to create more technological advances. Can I have the next slide, please? computing in human genome, that talks about computing of the whole biological system. Next slide, please. And also, finally, to use this particular frontier into all areas of discipline, be it physics, chemistry, informatics, ethics, and so on and so forth. This is where I thought we have now moved into a kind of a convergence. Although we used to pride ourselves as biologists, physicists, chemistry, social scientists, media people, but the world is indicating to us that the knowledge is going to go into a convergence. And that convergence is facilitated by what we call the age of biology, where the shift is going to be from mechanical understanding of things around us to the more organic things that's understanding around us. So when we have used to have chemistry, physics, technology, informatics, all those things now has got a bioequivalence to it. So you have biochemistry, biophysics, biotechnology, bioinformatics, biocomputing, and so on and so forth, to show just the power of biology in this particular context. So what is the shift as far as we are concerned? The shift that I can see perhaps from the mechanical understanding or worldview that is very mechanistic, that is derived from the age of industrialization in the 17th or 18th centuries, where everything is understood as a kind of a clockwork sort of a model, that it is precise but it is not encompassing, that everything is looked in terms of very simplistically, in terms of the mechanical mechanism, that everything is reduced to a certain dimension. It is top down in the sense that people work on it. It is also from outside in the sense that it is assembled externally. It is made, it is artificial, and it is owned by somebody else. When I make a clock, for example, I own the clock. And therefore the world is understood as somebody is owning this world. A kind of a mechanical worldview, as it were. We're going to move into a different kind of a paradigm, a different kind of a worldview that is not only understood in terms of industrial model, but more on informatic model, more on the intangibles, as I mentioned earlier. The clock model is no longer the model that we will subscribe to. We'll look at it from an ecological model where everything is interconnected. And therefore it is no longer simple, it is going to be very complex. When our approach has been reductionist and simplistic, we need now to contend on how to do things in a very complex way and how to solve complex issues. It is bottom-up in the sense that everybody gets involved. It is not dictated from the top, but everybody needs to participate in creating, in finding solution to a problem. It is inside out rather than outside in. It is self-organizing like all biological systems are. It is therefore nurtured and grown, and therefore it is sustainable. It is not artificial in this particular context. Therefore we don't own it. And this is, I think, a very particular key point that I want to emphasize. We don't own knowledge. We are just a person who looks after knowledge and to be shared. And therefore the question of IP, the question of patents, become a questionable sort of move forward, whether you actually own the knowledge that you create, so to speak, rather than it to be shared freely with the world at large. And this is a new worldview of naturalistic understanding of what knowledge is all about. And indeed there is a terminology now called knowledge democracy. Like all democracies, when you participate and share them, knowledge is seen to be part and parcel of those kind of knowledge. What underpins all this to me is these two words of ego and eco. The old system regards human beings as the paragon of all animals and therefore has the right to do all the things that he wants to do. It's very hierarchical. He owns it, and therefore he does think what he thinks is right as far as the rational mind is concerned. The new system tells us about a very different system. It is not hierarchical, it is flat. You don't become a center of anything, but you network with everybody else. It is a flexible network. And we begin to understand this, we talk about Ebola. We begin to understand this from a different point of view. That this disease called Ebola is something to do with the kind of interrelationship between us and other beings, and how that relationship has somehow or rather, create a kind of a tension between two species, as it were. So, next please. So these are contrasts that I want to bring to you. Universities, for example, that is organized very hierarchically, may not be that university in the future. A university that is very rigid in its understanding and its bureaucracy may not be so in the future. A university that is actually very disconnected may not be so in the future. And why do I say this? Because if you look at the old model, this is what he has created. When you talk about innovation, we're still talking about the old set of ideas of creating wealth for individuals. And therefore we have a different kind of ethos, which what I call the materialistic me-first ethos. Can I have a slide, please? Yes. Yeah. All our graduates, mainly, are told to go out and create wealth for themselves and basically fend for themselves first before they think of others. And that is a very old way of thinking when you look at the Renaissance and so on and so forth. And you expand that into a societal kind of understanding, we create a lot more other problems, not only for individuals, but for individual community, individual nation, and last but not least, the whole globe, as it were, which is driven by what I call grit. And we have seen this happening in 2008, and we keep on seeing it happening again and again because of those kind of ethos that was brought about by a different kind of worldview. And this is where we are at a moment in time. Because of that kind of a worldview that is almost so different from the natural worldview that we know, we are now running into a kind of a problem. The world is set into a kind of a tipping point. Not only economically we are in trouble, but the economy that we actually are professing now are economy that is built on war technology, the so-called industrial military complex. And there is war, the technology or the economy are not able to function, and therefore we invent war again and again so that the economy can survive and the economy can move forward. And that is why we are not surprised, at least I'm not surprised, to see there is war after war after war, even as we move into the 21st century, which we thought, all of us, is going to be a more peaceful century. And as we go along, we also destroy the ecology, we also destroy the environment, and we are now in the tipping point of global warming and also climate change. And the underdeveloped world, the developing world, the southern hemisphere will be the worst affected if climatic change is not taken seriously by the developed world. So we need to move into a kind of a different thinking, a kind of different model which we think will be a better alternative to what we are having today. And this is what I call the organic, not only national model, but a planetary model where all of us can share. And the the UNESCO, particularly United Nations, has drafted out what we call the sustainable model that has three components of economy, ecology, and socio-cultural. And I have now taken it and split socio-cultural into two, because I think the cultural dimension is most important for the world to move on. I come to you today with my own national costume, because I always see Nigerians coming to Malaysia with their national costume. And I really do appreciate that, because not only we want to connect intellectually and academically, we also need to connect culturally. Because culture in the world today is under threat. As the world goes into globalization and we are moving into what I call a monocultural world, we do not understand the culture of other people, and the world is in tension most of the time. So I split that for a particular reason. But although this model is built on it, but the thinking is still the old thinking. We still compartmentalize ourselves. And therefore, when you talk about economy, the industrialists, can I have the next slide, please? The industrialists will be more gung-ho than everybody else to drive economy forward, whereas ecology and the rest of it will be taken by somebody else. What we need to do now is to break those silos, to look at things as a whole. Can you go back? I think you're moving too fast. We need to look at the thing as a whole, where there is no compartmentalization, and the compartmentalization is only very artificial. And therefore we need to build a base, is what I call the transdisciplinary base, where disciplines are there, but they are not in a siloed way, but they are more interacting with one another. And what does this mean? So let me just try to relate this to you, which you know, I think. All of us now have a discipline of ourselves. And we pride ourselves an expert, quote unquote, in that discipline. And therefore, sometimes we refuse to budge. If I'm a physicist, I have nothing to do with chemistry. And sometimes we can't even communicate with the people in the chemistry department because our jargon, because our outlook is very much different. This is what it is today. In many parts of the world, in universities, even in schools, we are separated by the silos that we created for ourselves. Move on next. Next. We begin to realize that we need to make some connection, and therefore the word multidisciplinary comes in, where people are beginning to connect with one another. We have got then biochemistry, for example. Yeah? But that is not enough. We need to move on next. Where we talk about interdisciplinary, where there is a connection, but it's only at the edges, not on the main ideas of what the discipline is all about. What we are suggesting as we move forward is to diffuse all this discipline into one, what we call the transdisciplinary sort of approach. And in fact, in trying to solve world problem, we will not be able to solve it, be it at a level of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, worse off as individual disciplines. We need to come together and understand what our knowledge is all about, how it could be related, how it could be shared, just like the organic model that I described to you earlier, where everything becomes, interconnected into one network. And this is not a new idea. This idea has been there for a long time, but nobody takes it on because we are not pushed to do it. We are now pushed to do it because of global warming, because of climatic change, and therefore we need to look at the model again. And this is a very fundamental sort of quote that I'm going to read to you. Everything must be done in order to reunite the two artificial antagonistic culture of science and arts. Being a vice chancellor, I understand the kind of tension that exists between these two. I'm sure Professor Ambali also understands. We need to create a new transdisciplinary culture, the preliminary condition for transformation of mentalities or mindsets. What are universities for if it's not because of transformation of mindsets? If your mindset is going to be stagnated because the way we devise knowledge, because the way knowledge interacted with one another, then I think that university needs to rethink itself. And the way to do it, I think, is to merge as much as this discipline together, which is not easy, but there's a task ahead of us. Instilling complex and transdisciplinary thoughts into the structures and programs of universities will permit its evolution towards somewhat forgotten mission, the study of universal. And this is what, when I started my discussion with you, it is not about Nigeria, neither is about Malaysia, it is about the world. It is about how university can serve the world in the context of a universal mission rather than just very individualistic, siloed mission. And this is where I find transdisciplinarity is important for us to understand. But admittedly, there are tensions, and the tensions we see them. Between economy and ecology, we have seen this a lot more. Yeah? Between economy and social, in the context of, for example, when we talk about research, for example, it is very much research that is benefiting economy rather than social dimensions. Yeah? And I'm talking about, for example, indigenous knowledge. I'm talking about indigenous wisdom, indigenous practices. That's where I bring you to this whole concept of culture. Where do we live our culture as we move forward into quote-unquote a modern society? Do we just abandon them? Or do we look at them and bring them into a kind of a mainstream as part and parcel of knowledge that needs to be reckoned with? When I was in Peru last year, when we were in the Amazon, I made a slight comment which I thought would be just a normal comment. I talked to one of them and said, it's rather warm today. And indeed it is warm. But the reply that I got to one of the person is this: let me call the wind. Yeah? I don't know whether it is an imagination of mine, but a few minutes later you feel the wind, you feel the draft, you feel there's something happening rather than it being dry and warm. You know? And I begin to talk to this person, what is it that we talked about calling the wind? And he goes into another realm of knowledge that we have not known before in the so-called modern universities or modern knowledge structures. So I'm beginning to be interested in the other realms of knowledge that we have totally forgotten, and this is where the context of culture becomes important. Look at not economy, social, ecology and culture. Look at the 4 P's. Prosperity, people, planet, and policy. These 4 P's must jive. To get prosperity, you must be in touch with the right policy. The right policy must be able to be answerable to a group of people that is, going to be impacted by it. And last but not least, the planet needs to be the context of what we discuss. It is no longer necessary to talk about a lifestyle that needs 5 planets. And this lifestyle is a lifestyle in the United States of America. You can live like an American, but studies have shown us if you want to live like an American, we must have 5 planets to back us up. And we've got no 5 planets. We've got one very ailing planet. We want to live like a European, fine, but you need 3 planets to back you up. We do not have 3 planets. And therefore, we need to make this adjustment in terms of that policy, where prosperity is shared rather than dominated by one group, and it is therefore, contextualized in a planetary way of looking at things. Can I have the next slide? As it stands today, the way I look at it, when we talk about knowledge, when we talk about mission of the university, we are very biased economy. At the expense of our own culture, at the expense of the planet, and the expense of some of the policies that we created. And I think this is not transdisciplinary, this is rather a very dominant, a monodisciplinary way of thinking. And how do we move about making this change is a kind of problems that all of us must begin to think about. Next. This is a statement that I want to share with you. It is a statement by a very eminent environmentalist. Maybe you want to invite him for your next convocation lecture. He's also an educationist, and he's written a piece maybe 10 years ago, David Orr, and his question is very fundamental. What is education for? He has listed 6 myths, and he's also listed the ways how we're going to solve this problem. Yeah? And what strikes me is one of his statements, while we recognize all these problems and we are in dire need for it, and he noted this, it is worth noting that it is not the work of ignorant people. It is rather largely the results of work by people with BAs, BScs, LLBs, MBAs, and PhDs. I guess half of us is responsible for this, in this whole list. And he reasoned, because the BAs, the BScs, the LLBs, the MBAs are very siloed in this nature. We are in no position to solve world problem. In fact, we are beginning to be part of the problem. And I think this is a very different way of looking at what knowledge is all about. As people walk with their degrees tomorrow, you can have a question mark in your head. What more damage can this do? Rather than how do we solve the problem of the world, because the way we teach them, the way we organize knowledge may not be suited in problem solving per se. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm going to quote you a very eminent person, Steve Jobs. The Vice Chancellor quoted Steve Jobs also in the same context of connecting dots. A lot of people in our industry haven't had the vast experience, and this diversity of experience is what transdisciplinarity is all about. That you do not only experience biology, you also experience physics, you also experience social science, you also experience religious studies, you also experience many, many things. So that you are able to connect the dots. Otherwise, it says, they do not have enough dots to connect. And at the end of the day, we end up in a linear, mechanistic solution without a broad perspective of the problem. The broader one understanding of human experience, the better the design we have. And understanding and experience, the human experience, is about us connecting culturally with one another. Let me give you a simple example of what connecting dots is all about. Can I have the next slide, please? If you don't have the vastness of experience, next, when you talk about iceberg, no, move back. When you talk about iceberg in the context of global warming, for example, the glacial sort of deterioration that we see, we can only imagine what we know, and that is 2 ice cubes and cup. And that context is not going to solve problems. Yeah? So how do we connect dots? These are, next slide please. 9 dots. I'm sure some of you have done this. Can you connect it with 4 lines without lifting up your pen or pencil? Yeah? We have not time now, but go back and try this. If you look at the 4 dots, you will only see squares. And therefore, most people, can I have the next slide please? Do it 4 times. One more time. One more time. Because we see it as a square, we begin to try and solve problems within the square that we know. And we will never be able, until Carl comes home, connect the 9 dots. Right? Next, please. What we need to do, therefore, to connect the dots, can I have 4 times now? 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to connect the dots by moving away from your square paradigm. You need to move out of your physics if you're a physicist. You need to move out from the legal dimension if you're a lawyer. You need to move out from the pharmacy dimension if I'm a pharmacist to understand how we're going to solve problems. Keep to your paradigm of square, you will not solve it. And that is transdisciplinary innovation, the way I understand it. Yeah? If you confine yourself with this, you will end up to be an expert in your discipline, but that's about it. You are not there to solve, quote-unquote, universal human problem as such. Yeah? We need to now move into a different kind of thinking, a different kind of mindset. Can I have the next slide, please? When you connect the dots, you begin to unify knowledge. The knowledge needs to be converged, and you begin to have deeper meanings in terms of knowledge. And this meaning of knowledge is what concerns me today. How do you understand knowledge from a paradigm that is really very universal? And let me try and illustrate what I mean. Next slide, please. These are examples that now is in existence around us. Yeah? Don't press it yet. The first one is a termite hill or an ant hill somewhere in Zimbabwe. When a biologist sees this, what does he see? Perhaps the termite hills, and that's about it. But a person who has got a transdisciplinary ideas of how to use this are able to manifest it in a different way. And therefore, press 1. This is a building now created using that model of the termite hill, which is energy efficient, which is very cost effective, and which do not need air conditioning the way we understand it today. Learning from biology, learning from nature, but you need to make the connection, and that's where connecting the dots. Second one is this bird, migratory birds. You know that they always travel in a V shape. And the science has said that they travel in the V shape because they leverage energy from one another. You know, when the first bird that is tired, then the second bird will take over, he moves to the back. And they move for miles and miles into the other part of the universe. Yeah? Faced with problems of fossil fuel and all these other world problems as far as energy is concerned, people are now studying how do we get airlines to fly by learning from how the birds fly. Again, you begin to connect the dots, aeroplane and birds. Yeah? And the last one, I think all of us know, is a question of Velcro. Next, please. Yeah? How do we learn from this particular species that can connect, but you can pull them out without destroying or damaging whatever it is. That is how connecting dots is concerned. But the most recent dots that really amazes me was just maybe 3 months or 4 months ago. Can I have the next slide, please? This is about creating screws for connecting bones that are broken, but not made of metal or anything that is, you know, that is hard. But this is created by silk, using silkworm and the cocoon. Now you can use these as screws, which is as hard as metal, but yet it can dissolve itself after a while, and the patient can be back to normal as such. When you do X-ray, it does not disturb the X-ray because the screw is, X-ray can pass through. Now, this very simple example tells us we can learn from nature, we can learn from other inspirations if we begin to move out of our paradigm as well. If we begin to understand what ecology is all about, we begin to appreciate the creation of God as a source of knowledge for us to move forward. Can I have the next slide, please? So we need not to be wired. What I'm saying is that we need not to be hardwired from the kind of knowledge we got, but remain flexible and remain connected. What is happening today, next slide please, is that we have begin to be so wired with our way of thinking. And I'm getting worried when I look at my son and my daughters, when they look at this gadget called the iPads and the iPods. You know, during my time we can at least remember 10 telephone numbers, because we have no other ways of remembering them but to commit to memory. This younger generation will tell them, what's a phone number? They say, let me switch on my iPod. Or let me switch on my iPad. You know? And suddenly the battery is not well charged, and say, I can't give a number because the battery is flat. We become too dependent on the so-called technology that will give us a different kind of impact at the end of the day. And this is what we need to teach our students. This is what we need to teach our children, of how to balance life with technology. And technology does not dominate us as a kind of, in a slavish way, that we become the slaves of technology. Next. And if I look at this tension, I can almost draw a parallel from my own understanding of how we organize ourselves in the university. Let's take the first one, fresh one. When we talk about economy today, we are beginning to contextualize it in R&D. There's a debate in my country just before I leave that the university is accused of not commercializing enough. And so happened that a week before, the same accusation happened in Oxford University. And the Vice Chancellor in Oxford University says, research is for knowledge, commercialization is second. But we are now driven by economy, and therefore anything which is not related to economy, and by and large these are social problems that we've got. The cultural problems that we've got are left behind. And given again the pressure to publish an ISI journal, high impact journal of international standards, we will begin to neglect some of our basic responsibility to our local population. That's the first tension. The second tension is, can I press one? It's about teaching. Teaching and learning deriving from research will have the same effect at the end of the day. And tell our students to go to the community now and engage the community, they know very little how to do it. And therefore IAU has taken the initiative to create what we call the third mission of the university, that is social engagement. In other words, whatever you learn in the classroom, in lecture hall, you are able to translate it for the benefit of the community around you. And otherwise, it becomes a useless knowledge. The third one, can you press the third one? Yes, social engagement. exactly what I meant to say. And the last one is about preservation. Last one, please. Yeah. So in organizing knowledge, in organizing activities, we need to start looking for balance. We need to start looking for meaning. And this is where I think the major shift is going to be in terms of how we organize ourselves for the future. Can I have the next slide, please? It's about balance. There's a symbolic way of the yin and yang as far as the East is concerned. Yeah, it has to be balanced. Otherwise, you will go out of balance, as we have seen before. Next slide, please. So, what do I mean by the search for meaning, and where does technology comes into play? I'll give you a very clear example of this. First, press 1. All right. Technology was organized in such a way earlier, it is about market push. So we create certain thing, and then they'll push to the market, and then we will buy it. A good example of this was watch, the wristwatch that you've got. Long before it becomes a wristwatch, it is a jewelry. Only certain people will be able to buy them because they're expensive. And it's not meant for looking at times, but it's more meant for showing off as a kind of symbolic status. So you don't have the money, you don't buy that kind of a watch. This is what we call the market push. But in 1970s, next one please, when the Japanese invented the digital clock, it becomes a mass production. Everybody can afford to buy it. Whereas initially it is very much a Swiss maker kind of an expertise, now it's accessible to everyone in the world. And that notion, meaning of jewelry has moved into a timekeeping device. It is no longer jewelry. Seiko, Citizen, name it in the Japanese way, they are not jewelry per se. They are more timekeeping pieces. And therefore everybody buys them. And what happened? Sort of lifestyle. Yeah? And therefore the whole concept of what a watch is, or was, in terms of jewelry, has moved into something else, has given it to a different, broader meaning that everybody else can participate and be involved. And this is what innovation at the end of the day is going to be like. What is the meaning of that innovation that you're going to create, apart from just wealth creation? How does it benefit the larger pool of people? And this is what the meaning of innovation is, as far as I'm concerned. That you begin to move from that mechanistic worldview to a very naturalistic worldview. It is no longer just one dominant worldview, it is a multiple worldview, and it is where culture becomes important. It is no longer fragmented, it is no longer detached from our lifestyle, it is part of it. We are engulfed in that lifestyle, and it is connected to our everyday living. It is no longer linear, it is non-linear, it is complex, we've mentioned that. It is not just tangible, it is also intangible. There are values involved in it. And this way, I come back to the word culture and religion, because this is where the sacred values are, and these are the things that actually will move things forward internally rather than just externally. It is not just value-based, it is values-based. Yeah? It is not just partial and reductionist, it is total, holistic, and also comprehensive and sustainable. I'd like to end with a few quotes, and this is where I think some of the ideas that I mentioned to you come. When I first get in touch with this quote, which I think should be a compulsory reading to all academics. It's called Conscience, Unity of Knowledge. The greatest enterprise of the mind has always been, and always will be, the attempted linkage of sciences and humanities. And yet this, the biggest issue we've got now, science and humanities are almost separated, poles apart. The ongoing fractionation of knowledge and the resulting chaos in philosophy are not a reflection of the real world, which is actually culturally diverse, but an artifact of scholarship. As I said earlier, we begin to create our own discipline, we begin to own it, we begin to profess it, and we disregard other disciplines around. If we are the one that is responsible for this fragmentation of knowledge, we must be the person who all put it back together as one form of knowledge in the context of convergent, and is what silence means as far as unity of knowledge. Next. So let me just conclude by saying we need now, as far as I can see, to start thinking of how we need to move away from our own paradigm and silos, begin to connect the dots, and can I have the next slide, please? And move on. It cannot be done over a day, it cannot be done over a month, it cannot be done over a year, but it needs to be done stepwise so that at the end of the day, one slide please. Higher education will meet for a higher purpose, rather than just talking about employability, employment, and so on and so forth. There's other things that we need to think about in terms of our education to bring humanity to a state where all of us can be proud of, where the dignity of human beings are preserved, where humanitarian value become the basis for us to interact with one another. On that note, I thank you very much for your attention.
I think he deserves another round of applause. That was intellectually stimulating. Before the academic session came in, I was about to talk about the fact that what Better by Far means to us and what it means to others. You know, people, when I've met people who tell me that you people in the University of Ilorin, you always say this Better by Far, see, you know, and I give them the facts about Better by Far, but I also tell them that this sources of where we plug into that has made us better by far is not only from us, and that's the hallmark of any educated person, a properly educated person, is humility. You realize that you don't have it all. There are others out there who have it, who have some of it, so you don't have everything. And so we have brought Professor Zulkifli Abdulrazak, a recognition of our humility on our part, that we don't have it all, and I'm sure that the University of Ilorin will be plugging into your lecture today and remain better by far. Thank you very much, Professor. We're moving on gradually. You're not going to hear my voice again for the next few minutes. I'll be handing over to our Vice Chancellor. I forgot to tell you his OON. It's a new thing, so we're just getting used to it. He got the award along with the immediate past Vice Chancellor recently. He's in recognition of hard work, of dedication, and so on and so forth. So the next item on the agenda is the interactive session, where we get to ask questions on what we have listened to. I'll hand the Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdulgani Ambadi, will be in charge of the next session.
Thank you very much, the MC. You will all agree with me that it has been a very wonderful 1 hour or so of listening to the #1 person in the world university system, and the innovation has been delivered not only through his presentation style, but the content of his presentation. And I'm happy to say that the University of Ilorin will be looking seriously into the content of his presentation. Also, we already have the roadmap of bringing all disciplines under one umbrella. We started that with the Central Research Lab that will be commissioned tomorrow, where people of different backgrounds, different disciplines will be housed under one roof and be forced at least to interact. And that is what is happening all over the world these days. We were in the US sometimes with our team, and we visited a lab where they intentionally put up restrooms and restaurants so that people in each lab will be forced at least to meet, either while going to the restroom or while eating. As a matter of fact, they have discouraged the idea of going out elsewhere to eat. They have gotten their small eatery place where they've been advised that even if you bring your lunch from home, you should go there to have your lunch. And by the so doing, you'll be forced to say hello to the person sitting on your right or left. And by so doing, you get to know each other, what each person is doing, and how you can connect the dots, between yours and theirs. And that idea will be domesticated here at the University of Ilorin. And of course, that's what makes us better. So I would thank you very much, Professor Razak. I know you're already exhausted. We are too, because sitting down, listening to you, captivated us, and we stopped thinking any other thing apart from what you were saying. So mentally, we are enriched. Physically, we have a little bit of breath in us, and by that little breath, we'll be able to ask one or two questions, so that we can get one or two things clarified, so that we can go home better. So, if you don't mind, maybe 3 questions or 4. One from this side, one from each compartment, if you permit. So we start, apart from the people here, you are disqualified from us. So maybe I start from my right. Anybody from this side? Okay, thank you. If there is nobody, then, okay, from the scholar, please.
Good morning. My name is Paul Johnson. And when the communication lecturer started, he mentioned something about robotics and artificial intelligence. I want to say, in a country where unemployment is very high, how can we relate unemployment with robotics? Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chancellor and the guest speaker, and thank you for the wonderful lecture. My question stems from the issue of innovation. I know innovation simplifies the way we do things, but then I have always have a concern regarding innovation, and that concern is ownership of innovation. How do we deal with the question or the problem of ownership? If I have the time, I will quickly just give an example. In the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, we have people coming up with pharmaceutical patents on drugs, for instance, for HIV/AIDS. But because innovation has made this possible, you have pharmaceutical companies claiming that they spend so much money on research and development, and drugs come out, and it becomes unaffordable for people from low-income countries like Nigeria. So because of this intellectual property and innovation, ownership becomes a problem. So how do we deal with the problem of owning innovation? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We can understand what is happening in terms of the question you asked.
only in the context of what has been given to us today. IP, for example, this has been a question that has been bothering us for a long time. When we say this knowledge is mine, and sometimes even the idea is somebody else's. If I verbalize those ideas, then you are not allowed to pick on it until you pay me a sum of money. Fundamentally, that is what it's all about. And therefore, this whole idea of knowledge democracy that has been now being re-articulated and being debated at the international level is basically looking at this question of ownership. Why do some people own knowledge as much as they own property while depriving others of that knowledge or even that property? And we can only understand that from the old mindset of being mechanistic that I mentioned to you. We will not be able to break this question until we change the worldview of what knowledge is all about, of what property is all about, of what humanity is all about. In the equation of the mechanical worldview, humanity is not a factor. Often people come and say to me, we need to move up the value chain. And I ask them, where is humanity in the value chain? He says, humanity is not part of my value chain. We are going back to what I mentioned fundamentally, the materialistic me first ethos. It's about me. And therefore the rest is not important. But I give you this shift, and this is my argument all along. When you look at the development of knowledge, particularly mathematics, some of you can relate to this. If you look at the Greek mathematics, the Roman mathematics, there is no zeros. Without zeros, you can hardly solve any problems. It is the Indians, with civilization, and then the Arabic refined it and introduced these zeros called sifar. And from that, the whole system of numbering changes. 0, 1, 2, 3, until 9. You know, the whole world take this system as though it's part of their own. The Indians do not say, I invented this, pay me the IP. I patented this. You are not allowed to use this until you recognize me in whatever you do. And so is their acts. But now when it goes into the technological world of the modern world, when they use 0 and 1 as a binary system and created all sorts of softwares and ITs and so on and so forth, suddenly if you want to use their software, they say it is copyrighted. My question to them, how much compensation do you pay when you use 0? This world is organized in such a way that people create rules for themselves so that they can remain in that ownership. And that's why when you talk about ranking, when you talk about all other things, I am very skeptical. These rules sometimes are invented so that they can maintain in the position of power while others catch up. And if we in the developing country subscribe to those rules without challenging it, as though that is a universal rule, although we talk about universality, then we are up against it. So the issue now is basically for us, intellectuals in these developing countries, need to come out with questions. Why suddenly you need to have IPs? Why suddenly there's this thing called copyright? And this is why I am very, very into culture, because people are taking our culture away, copyrighting it, and say it's theirs. Basmati rice, the whole product of medicine in Mexico, been taken up, copyrighted, and now the Mexican wants to use it, they have to pay money to the copyright owner when it is indigenously theirs. from days and days and days before. It is about the rule of the game. It is about the rule. Who sets the rule of the game? I'll give you another example. Hockey. If you think only about academic, let's talk about sports. The Indians, the Pakistani, the Bangladeshis are very good in hockey. I don't know if you play hockey in Nigeria. Yeah, you run after a small ball with a stick. It doesn't look very sensible, but you know. And they are good at this on a grass turf. They keep on winning. Gold medal, Olympic, whatever, they keep on winning. The Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, and the Indians. What happens? The rule of the game is changed again. On international sports, you need to play it on an astroturf, which is an artificial grass, which costs millions to put in. Pakistanis, the Indians, and the Bangladeshis can't afford it. And therefore, who dominates hockey now? The Europeans. Suddenly the Germans become world champions. You know? Ladies and gentlemen, knowledge has come to that level. You change the rule of the game, you maintain your power structure, you become dominant, you don't care about something. There's the same answer about robotics. The world demographic changes has gone in such a way that many developed countries have got now low birth rates. The birth rates are very low. And therefore what they do? They invent robots because they need to manufacture and go on producing and defend the economy. Yeah? But for third world countries where there are a lot of people need jobs, the robotics is not a solution. I went to Hyderabad. Hyderabad is supposed to be the IT hub of India, one at least. My bag didn't come in time. And I went to the counter and said, my bag didn't arrive. He says, never mind, you need to do a report. So he came up with this form that I need to fill. But what shocks me is that the carbon paper, I have not seen a carbon paper for ages, is put in. You know, I say, are you not the IT hub? Why are you still using carbon papers? He says, if I use IT, tens and thousands of people are not allowed. So they would rather go and use the carbon paper. So it's all our wisdom. Whether we are more for profit creation, wealth creation for the few who manage the robots, or are we in terms of helping the larger majority who need the bread and butter to be defended? It's a question that we need to ask. But if you follow that monolistic model that I talked to you about, then you're going to deal with other kind of a problem. You know? And these are issues that I think we need to think about very, very hard on how we shape our nation, how we shape our education system, and how we shape our universities. If people in universities are what I call within a herd mentality, you know, somebody blow a whistle and we run without investigating what the whistle is all about, then I think we just need to pay the price. And therefore we fail ourselves as intellectuals and as universities. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, Your Majesty.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, distinguished lecturer, I'm just trying to formulate a question, but I'll get to the question. The first thing is, you being at the apex of the universities, couldn't you also stimulate, or in fact ask us to set up somebody right now that's focused on that, not at university level, but at state levels across the world, across the third world? Can we start a campaign of rationalizing knowledge? A body, a council for local awareness and rationalizing knowledge in context of our development. I think that movement should start now. Maybe from this university, since better by far. The other thing I'm thinking about is, while we're trying to use cultural context to see how things are relevant or knowledge relevant to us, our children are getting lost in the cyberspace. So, what do we do to arrest this loss in cyberspace, where they're losing their culture, their religion, their everything. They're sitting there in the sitting room with you. You're talking to them, they say, yes, I'm coming, Daddy. I want you to know, what did you say, Daddy? They were talking to Japan, buttoning to America, looking at different things, and totally the different mindset. They're living in a cyber world, different world from you. And now you want to communicate with these people. I don't know, I'm trying to mix two these things together. It's getting very difficult. I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
Let me start with the second one, with IT. While we recognize the importance of IT, that it is useful to bridge gaps and also to basically, make knowledge available to more people. What we do not recognize, perhaps, is the knowledge that needs to go along with the use of IT. Well, I'll give you a simple example. Most of us will have handphones, I believe. If I asked you, how many of you know how to dispose your handphone? I'm quite sure many do not. Disposing handphone is one of the most important fundamentals in using handphone, because handphone itself is toxic. There are a lot of toxic materials in your handphone that will pollute air, will pollute water, they will pollute soil. And if you do not know how to dispose that, you will then be polluting. Simple question. And therefore, when we talk about IT, there's an article that says, if you want to make IT function as a communicator of knowledge, one fundamental issue must be there. There's a development of trust. A very tangible value, IT, and a very intangible value, trust. If you don't have trust, your IT will not function the way it is meant to be. And indeed it is. At least in my country, when you look at the social media today, we are not sure whether you need to trust them or not. Whether they are telling the truth or otherwise. Whether it is actually meant just to create another red herring so that you can run into another problem. And this can come from anybody. In fact, the security of the nation now is basically based on this trust that we talked about. The whole national security problem of the Americans, with the WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden and so on and so forth, tell us IT is there fine, but if there is no trust, it will not work. And I come back to my notion of transdisciplinary. I am contextualizing in the context of values. How much of values do we teach in our classroom? So that trust became a compass for us when we want to use IT. Not just IT, any other thing. How much of this is happening? It is not happening. People are looking at IT as a kind of a panacea that solves problems. In my country, we are very critical that the government now gives iPad or a laptop, a tablet to almost everybody, without even inducting them into what IT is all about and how do we trust around. So that is a fundamental issue of how we approach IT. We look at IT as something which is actually a problem solver for all times, not understanding that IT must be governed by a set of values. If that set of values do not happen, then IT becomes what it is today. The second question is even tougher, because all of us, as we're told, to be world class, you need to have A, B, C, D. You don't have A, B, C, D, you are not world class. Yeah? My question is always, whose world? Whose world are we talking about? The world in the southern hemisphere is not the same as the world in the northern hemisphere that sets its rules. Your A, B, C, D in the northern hemisphere do not apply to me in the southern hemisphere. It's the same question of setting the rules and telling you to play like. It's the same question of playing hockey on a national turf. You suddenly tell me to play hockey in a national turf. I don't want to play hockey in a national turf. I'm good on a grass turf. I want to play hockey on the grass. If you want to compete with me on the grass turf, not on the short turf. Because that is my world. But we've gone into a definition, there's only one world, and the world is decided in either in Washington, in Geneva, in Paris, and somewhere else. And we have no business in deciding what world we want to create. Yeah. And therefore, your question is, for us now we are pushing, the IAU is pushing what we call open sources. In other words, if you think your work is good enough, you publish it. You don't have to be confined to somebody else's rule. The internet is there. Yeah? There is what we call the open sources, where everybody can subscribe. And there are people who are creating the so-called quote-unquote programs that is not proprietary. It's not of Microsoft, it's not of Google, but it's a group of people who create the software that you can perhaps share them without any cost at all. We are moving into that direction now. Of course, it takes a longer time, but I think there is already an awareness that this must happen rather than being stuck with the rule of the game, that we will be disadvantaged anyway. Yeah? I don't know whether I answered your question. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, okay, just from this row, Professor.
Mr. Chairman, sir, the August Convocation lecturer, I want to appreciate the efforts put into this lecture. I will be speaking the mind of everybody here if I say that this lecture has been well prepared, well researched, and eloquently presented. I also want to say that usually it is easier said than done. I love your theory of the holistic nature of knowledge. But there are adages and proverbs on ground that show that we can never get to a whole without compartmentalization of knowledge. I look at the sitting arrangement over there. I look at your own self, your own discipline. And without actually being able to identify your own discipline, I know it's different from the discipline of the Mr. Chairman. Different from that of DVC, which is not only education, but specifically educational management. And then my DVC, the other DVC, chemistry, the librarian, the one in medicine, and the others, and all of us here. Now, at which point in time do we connect the dots across the various disciplines over there and here? And how do we connect the dots? Thank you.
Thank you. I love the question. I like it in the sense that it's easier said than done. I would first agree. And that's why it takes a long time for me to pluck courage to talk to an audience like you and other audiences for what I think that needs to be done. The option is if we don't do anything about it, the systems will get even worse. Education has shown that higher education, there's an article recently that says that higher education is a source of inequality. More recent article that shows equalizer no more. Whereas at one time we were told that education is a leveler of society. And that's why we rush for education, but at the end of the day, they think they can be at level with somebody else. That is really a myth today. the disparity between people with education and without education is getting wider and wider. Again, I come back to the third world, where there's opportunity for education becomes even more and more scarce. In my country, we've got private institutions, okay? And private education, by and large, is driven by profit. And therefore, they will teach you what can create job opportunities for you. So you have IT, you have commerce, you have management. None of them will talk about philosophy, no social sciences, no humanities, religious studies, very few. And that is hardly knowledge. If you go out to be an IT expert, but you do not know the philosophy of education and where it's going to bring you, then I think you are not educated at all. You're probably at best have got a certificate. So the choice for me is basically to start talking about it. Difficult as it is, but I think it is not impossible. And why do I tell you it's not impossible? First, because if you look back to the history of knowledge, when knowledge first originates, it wasn't compartmentalized. Being a Muslim, I understand this well when I look at history of the Islamic, what we call civilization. Most Muslims at that particular time who call themselves scholars, they are able to master at least 7 or 8 disciplines. Ibn Sina, the most well-known doctor whose treatise has been used in the Western world for 500 years, is a philosopher. He's an astronomer. He knows mathematics. He's a musician. Al-Kindi can master 14 disciplines and write 200 books. At a time when there is no IT, we have got PhDs, specializes in one small compartment, how many books have we written? I just say that we've got the model wrong. But it's not an impossible model. It is a difficult model to implement, but we need to start somewhere. If we don't start somewhere, forever we will be in this state of affair, and education will not serve its purpose, at least for us. So I would want to imagine, at least when I was in Abu Dhabi University, what we did is basically year 1 philosophy is compulsory for everyone. Studies, what we call studies of great civilization, is compulsory for everybody. So that you know where knowledge starts from the day of the Africans, you know, the Sumerians, until now. You know how this knowledge changed along the way, who changed it, and for what reason do they change it. It is not given to us because knowledge is like that. Yeah? Ethics is compulsory for everybody. That is the basis of year 1 before you move on to your so-called specialized compartmentalized knowledge. At least you have this compass of what knowledge is all about and where does it take you. But it is a long journey. But everything else starts with the first step. In the university that I am now, and I'm very thankful to Professor Isha when he came to my university, we're beginning to talk about the integration between revealed knowledge and acquired knowledge. There is some sacredness in the knowledge that will not change. Now we say knowledge, because of innovation, everything changes. But there are certain values that will not change. And how do we incorporate this in our education system? These are initial thoughts, sir, but I know it's a long way to go. But I think it's not impossible. The moment you get politicians into this bandwagon, it makes it a lot easier. Because the politicians are sometimes the one who ask you for the numbers. Ilorin, what number? Number 1, fine. Even number 10, what's wrong with you? You know? Because the politicians do not also have the inkling of what education is all about. For them, it's just buying votes. Ilorin number 1, I get better votes. Ilorin number 10, I get worse votes. So go for number 1. But what is the purpose of education? It's an issue that all of us must be engaged in. It is not just about making life easy for us, but it's about, you know, making humanity what it is supposed to be. I may sound idealistic, I'm sorry, but let's start with some idealism so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you most sincerely. But please, I will still beg you for something. Because my two MCs just whispered to me and put up two requests that they would like to ask you a question each. But it's either I give them an air ticket to come and meet you in Malaysia, or I allow them here. So I'm taking the second option. So please.
Can't we have it all?
No.
Okay, Dr. Billy Olajide says that Professor Oladeshu has asked that was what Professor Oladeshu asked was what he was going to ask. But my question hasn't been asked. You said one of the dangers of globalization is monoculture. Is monoculture. It's a bad thing. And so when you were talking about the advantages of the transdisciplinary view, you said a recognition of many cultures. Well, I was thinking, and I think that a transdisciplinary view could pose a danger of the evolution of a monoculture. We will think that this one culture, we've tapped into several cultures, and this is the solution, this is the best solution, and we may end up thinking that that is the only solution to a particular problem. Am I right? That's my question.
Let me understand you. When I talk globalization, the trend is to monoculture, and I don't subscribe to that. Yeah? Because my issue with that is basically, let's talk about language. It's been documented now by National Geographic. Every 2 weeks, one language dies. Every 2 weeks, one language dies, just in it. The word, I begin to understand the word Ubuntu. It has laden with meaning. Imagine this word Ubuntu dies. I think we have lost another wisdom of how humanity can relate to one another. You know, I think Ubuntu is one of the solutions to the problem of course. But it is not welcome. I'm part of the Ubuntu committee of UNESCO. It feels strange. But because the power of this word has certain meaning that will hopefully solve some of the problems that we solve, then it becomes an important problem. What I'm saying is that if we go, Ubuntu cannot be translated into English language. Many things cannot be translated into English language. But because the language is dominantly translated, and we lost the meaning. And I see my Japanese friend when they talk about Kaizen, which is continuous improvement. And when he teaches Kaizen, he will mention Kaizen. He doesn't talk about continuous improvement. And I say, why? He says, continuous improvement is not Kaizen. Kaizen has its cultural nuances. Kaizen has its own value that is not captured when you translate it into English. And therefore, we need this wealth of other knowledge and other cultures to be part and parcel, to enrich us. You know, to enrich us. And this is why I'm maintaining that this transdisciplinary view that takes what is good from other cultures is important. And that is why I also maintain we need to maintain the sacred. That things do not change at the end of the day where everybody can relate to it. And this is typical in our society of agriculture, that there are certain things in the practice of planting a paddy or rice that do not change. But that will maintain the wholeness of this culture. And until we get that sacredness and share it with the world around us, then this fight will go. But the moment you know this is the common reference point, you know, then I think we are in a better world where we meet with one another. I just want to quote with another professor who just came across, and he told me, Zul, I want to come to Malaysia in the East to learn about FX. He's a professor of business entrepreneurship in one of the renowned universities in the West. I will not mention this one. He says, in the West we have lost it up to that. We need to come to the East now to learn about ethics. And he is precisely my point. I will answer your question.
You will still be around. You'll still be around for the next 3 days.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, sir.
Please give the member lecturer a round of applause. So back to the MC, please.
Thank you very much, sir. We are gradually coming to the end of this program. We now want to take the vote of thanks to be given by the university's registrar. Vote of thanks.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before we give the vote of thanks, we want to first appreciate the convocation lecturer and the family who have graced this occasion with this wonderful lecture that we've had. Please, can we give them a round of applause? It is customary for the University of Ilorin to appreciate her guests. And today we have this special guest with us, the lecturer. He has come because we have invited him. It is possible we invite him and he says he's not coming. Of course, we won't be here listening to him. We invited him. And a child. Of course, this is marvelous in our eyes. Please, let us applaud him again. Having said this, we want to appreciate you. We want you to always remember that you are in the University of Ilorin. And that is why we want to do this little presentation to you as a memento, for you to know that here we are a place of harmony and we are always better by far. So I want to invite you, the convocation lecturer, to please step forward and for honoring us, for exchanging views with us, and for telling us what we need to do to move higher education forward. So on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, the Governing Council, Senate, and the entire University of Ilorin community, we thank you for coming and we appreciate you. Thank you. And going with this, I'm so privileged to also present this to you for honoring our 30th convocation lecture, delivering the lecture. Thank you very much again. I invite my deputy to please make another presentation to the wife. She's going to step down. She's going to step down to the wife to give this little token to her on our behalf. Mike, please.
I agree with me that it's been so far, so fine. On behalf of council, management, staff, students, especially our brothers, we want to thank you for supporting your husband in this gospel of transdisciplinary education. We want to thank you for coming with him and accompanying him in his trip. So thank you so much. On behalf of every one of us who present this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm sorry. By your gestures. I thought I'll be here just to give another lecture to another honorary audience, like all lectures do. But I found out there was a mistaken belief when Professor Mokulu would take me to his palace as described by the Vice Chancellor. People have been honoring, given the honor of giving these convocation lectures, and I feel suddenly very small that I am not at their league of giving the lectures like this. But the way you have treated us, I must say, there is something that I will keep in my heart for a long time. I think we have met for longer terms than just meeting Professor Isha and Professor Bali. We hope we can create a kind of a collaboration together. If this endeavor that we believe we should do together, I'm most happy to be with you on this project.
Thank you very much, sir. Now it's left for me to appreciate us one after the other. One, let me first of all appreciate the Almighty God for bringing this day to success. Yesterday we started the convocation ceremonies and we had day 1. Today is day 2. And gradually we are rounding up this particular program. We want to thank the Almighty God for the opportunity He has granted us. Our thanks go to the Ambassador of Cuba to Nigeria. We want to appreciate you for taking out time to attend this convocation lecture. We appreciate you, sir. To my royal fathers, our royal fathers, we appreciate your coming. We pray that God will continue to assist you as you lead your domain. Thank you very much. To our justices, that's our Lord Temporal, we appreciate your coming, Justice Akambi and Justice Elelu. We want to thank you for attending this program. Thank you very much. Members of the Governing Council of the University of Ilorin who are here, we appreciate you for coming. Thank you very much. To the former Vice Chancellors, the Oloides, Oloide, we appreciate your coming. Thank you very much, sir. To the wives of our Vice Chancellor current, Vice Chancellor past, and the wife of our convocation lecturer, we appreciate you all for coming. Thank you very much. The CMD of UITH, you are one of our own. I know you are just on loan somewhere. We thank you for coming and always attending our programs. Thank you very much. The former DVCs, Olayemi, DVCMS, Oladele, DVCRTI. Thank you for attending this lecture. All our principal officers, we thank you. All our deans, directors, we appreciate you. All members of Senate, we thank you for coming. Our scholars, please can you stand up for recognition? Our scholars, we thank you for always honoring us when we call you. Thank you very much for coming. You can sit down. To all other staff of this university, both teaching and non-teaching, who have graced this occasion, we thank you very much for taking our time to be here. And to our students, those that are graduating and those that are still in the school, we appreciate your coming, your patience, and what you have done to make this occasion a success. And to all of us, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your coming, and we have a balance here that we don't say goodbye to our guests. To all our guests, we want to see you again. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank Thank you, sir. That's the registrar, Mr. Emmanuel Dada Obafemi. Some quick announcements before we come to the end of today's program. There will be a host and the deans. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for being a part of today's success. We would like to invite you for other programs. Tomorrow we start with the convocation ceremony, in the proper convocation ceremony of some faculties, first degrees. We hope you join us tomorrow. Can we please rise for the university anthem?